This is Del McCoury, and you're walking the floor. No, you're not. You're listening.
That's perfect.
I'm walking the floor over you.
Walking the floor.
I'm walking the floor. Walking the floor over you.
Hola, senors and senoritas. This is Chris Shiplet, and welcome to episode 190 of your favorite podcast, Walking the Floor. A couple episodes ago, I asked all you kind folks for some gardening tips because I got these garden beds at my house that are kind of shaded. They're mostly shaded. They're shaded for most of the day. They don't get enough sun. And I asked the kind listeners out there to give me some gardening tips, and you guys have responded in kind. I got lots of good gardening tips, but keep them coming because I still don't really know what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm going to transfer I got some melon seedlings that I started. I'm going to transfer them into some pots this weekend so I can move them around the yard and kind of chase the sun. But I don't know, if you're like me, when I don't really know much of anything, I turn to YouTube and I start watching videos, and I just watch videos over and over, different videos on how to do stuff. And I watch a whole bunch of them on gardening stuff, and I just feel like I'm more confused than I was before I watched the video. So I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm trying to figure it out. And I screw up my garden every year, and this year I'm really giving it the old heave-ho. So hook me up with all of your gardening knowledge, kind listeners. I appreciate it. I read them. I get them. What else? I've got, like I told y'all, I went out and recorded a few new tunes out in Nashville a couple weeks ago, and I got the first couple songs mixed. I think they're done being mixed. I'm really stoked. I can't wait to get them out there and play them for you sooner than later. And still working on the other two. I got like 4 new songs in the can, and it'll be coming soon. I don't know when, I don't know how, but soon. I promise. All right, let's talk about our good friends over at Zounds.com. Zounds.com, did you know that they've got warehouses strategically located all across the United States to get you your gear faster than anybody else out there on the internet? So when you need your music gear, you get on over to Zounds.com because like 90% of their orders arrive within 2 days or less, and you don't have to pay for that shipping. Zounds.com. All right, come on, let's get to the interview. One of my favorite things about doing this podcast over the years is every now and again I get to talk to an absolute legend, and today is one of those episodes. I got Mr. Del McCoury, living legend of Bluegrass. This is a guy who has made music with everybody from Bill Monroe to Doc Watson to David Grisman, and continues making great records with his sons, which I think is like the coolest thing. We had a very nice, long, rambling talk, covered a lot of stuff. I really didn't want to edit too much out of it, so sit back and get comfortable, because this is Del McCoury on Walking the Floor.
And he pulled from behind. Went down to Knoxville.
That was my wife, Jean, there, Chris.
Oh, right on. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thanks a million for sitting down and doing this with me. I am very excited.
Yeah, glad to do it.
So I got to tell you, first off, I was just doing research on you and getting together some questions, and I was watching some YouTube interviews that you had done, and there was one where somebody was asking you to explain something, and you said something to the effect, and this really like struck a chord with me. You said something to the effect of, "We don't know what we're doing half the time." Which I love, because like that's kind of the funny thing about being a musician, right? Like you go out, you make these records, you go on tour, you're into this genre or that genre or whatever, and you have to spend your whole life explaining why. And like we don't know.
You don't, do you? It's true. We just don't know, from one minute to the next. Because you're doing you go out on the road. Well, you just go where they tell you to go.
Right. And even just like, deeper than that, it's just like, why do I play guitar? Why do I like this kind of music or that kind of music or what, I don't know. I find myself just making up answers half the time.
Yeah, it's true. You do, because, you think, well, now I've said this before, so I'll say something different this time, So
exactly,
you give them the wrong answer, but that's just the way it is, though,
You said something else in an interview that I thought was really interesting too, that I connected with. And that was about, like, somebody was asking you, do you go to a lot of shows or do you listen to a lot of new music, and you were just kind of like, nope, no, I don't. Because I feel like there's this never ending pressure in this business to, like, you got to, like, pretend like you're listening to the newest thing that comes along all the time. And, like, for me, I find myself kind of leaning more on, I mean, I do listen to a lot of new music, I guess, but I also find myself listening to the stuff I grew up with a ton, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, because that's what influenced you to start with, you know, wasn't it? I know,
right?
Myself, I heard of Bill Monroe back in the actually, I didn't know too much about music in the 40s till the late 40s. And then Bill was on the Grand Ole Opry, you know, and Flatt and Scruggs were still in his band then, you know, and then they broke off and got their own band. And I really didn't get that much interested in music, although I played music. My brother, he played guitar and sang, and he did all of the old country songs, you know, like Roy Acuff and Ernest Tubb, Walking the Floor.
Yeah.
and all those guys back in that day, you know, and also Bill Monroe. But back then, you know, Bill Monroe, he was kind of just lumped in with all the other country acts or hillbilly acts. They call them hillbilly back then. And so that's what I heard, you know, and still when I want to hear, if I do want to listen to something, you know, I still like to listen to Bill Monroe or Flatt and Scruggs, you know, because they did set a blueprint for this type of music, actually, you know. If it hadn't been for them, there wouldn't have been any bluegrass music, really, you know.
I mean, who else were you listening to growing up? Like, who were some of the country music and bluegrass artists that most people wouldn't be familiar with? Even like people maybe just in your community where you were when you were a kid.
Well, you know, there was some guys on the radio, but I can't remember their names there around home. They weren't that good, I didn't think. So I didn't remember their names, you know. But I was, when I was like in my teenage years, you know, I was listening to Flatt and Scruggs and Bill Monroe. But at the same time, there were a lot of acts from the Grand Ole Opry, you know, that I had to listen to because they would come to the parks and country music parks that I'd go to, you know. And like Carl Smith, let me see, Farron Young, Old Lonesome Me guy, I forget that guy's name. Old Lonesome Me. What's his name? And Ernest Tubb and Roy Acuff, Hank Snow, Hank Williams. Now I was a little too young for Hank. I remember when he died, you know, people talked about that so much when Hank Williams died. All country people did, you know. And
sure.
And my brother, he used to sing a lot of those songs. And he heard him on the Opry when he came on and did all those encores the first night he was on there, you know. But,
really?
But I was too small, you know, to really listen to Hank Williams. Just the records. I heard his records. They were still playing his records when I was a teenager, you know.
Sure.
But at the same time, you know, kids my age in school, in high school, they were listening to Elvis and Jerry Lee and that Blue Suede Shoes guy, you know.
Carl Perkins?
Yeah. Oh,
right.
And that guy from St. Louis, you know,
Chuck Berry.
Chuck Berry, you know, and all kids my age, they were listening to that music, you know. But you know, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it because by this time I'd heard Earl Scruggs, and well, getting back to earlier than that, my brother taught me to play the guitar when I was about 9.
How old was your brother?
He was 9 years older than me. He'd have been 18.
Okay.
And he played on the radio and sang on the radio there locally, you know, where we lived. But I just wasn't, you know, he taught me to play and I'd play along with him a lot, you know, taught me the chords and all like that. But I wasn't really enthused about it till he bought this record of Flatt and Scruggs. It came out in 1950. And it was a tune called Roll in My Sweet Baby's Arms. And what what drew me to listen to that was the banjo. You know, Earl, he was peaking at that time. He was in his prime. He was probably 21.
I know you started on banjo before, or maybe you
Yeah.
started on guitar, but then really were focused on banjo before you were playing with Bill Monroe. But can you rip that Earl Scruggs style? Like, can you play like that?
Yeah, I did. You know, I played it for about 10 years. I played from listening to Earl Scruggs records and seeing him, you know, watching him live, you know, in places and seeing what he was doing with his left hand, what he's doing with his right hand, you know. But that one tune, what drew me to that, Lester Flatt, of course, was the lead singer, guitar player, and he'd sing. And on the first verse that Lester sang, Earl come behind him with a backup lick that, man, it just drove me nuts. Like learn it, you know.
Yeah.
and it was just a forward roll, and he'd start at open strings and slide all the way to almost to the head down there, and roll right there, you know. It was a backup lick that you would play behind a singer, you know.
Yeah.
But he was the one that developed all that stuff. He and Don Reno, and they were friends when they were young. Those two guys, they lived. Don Reno's from Spartanburg, South Carolina, and Earl Scruggs is from pretty close to, what was that town he was from? But it was real in North Carolina, just across the line, you know. And they both played for a band down in Asheville, North Carolina. Forget that guy, the band's name, but they became friends probably before they were 20. And they were both playing with a forward roll. It kind of came from that section of the country right in there.
Right. And your family's from North Carolina, right? Aren't your parents from North Carolina?
They are, yeah. They're from Western North Carolina, yeah.
Were they musical too? Like, did they play?
Well, you know, my mother, she played like the piano and the organ, and she could play harmonica and guitar. But she taught my oldest brother, you know, how to play, but I never got to hear that much, because by the time I came along, they already had 3 kids before me. And she was so busy, you know, raising kids that she never did play much when I came along. But that's kind of that's where our music came from. Now, my dad, he had uncles that played. That's all he did was play music and fox hunt down there in the mountains in North Carolina. He said that's all he done. I don't know. But yet he never took an interest in playing. He liked it, you know, he liked music, but he never took an interest at all in playing an instrument, you know. So my mother did.
So but you grew up in Pennsylvania, right?
I did.
Right.
Sure did. Yeah.
Now, is that where you grew up in Pennsylvania? Is that like one of those areas that is like technically? I'm just curious what your sort of childhood was like. But like, was it sort of technically northern but culturally southern? Like, with still a lot of like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean. Yeah, a lot. I'll tell you what happened, Chris. In the war years, like the Second World War. There's so many people that moved from the mountains in Carolina and Tennessee and Virginia up to Baltimore to work in the airplane factory, the steel mill, shipyard, you know. And of course, they brought their music with them, you know. What they were playing down in the mountains. You know, the first band. See where I grew up was in PA, and it's farm country,
right?
And Baltimore was only about 35 miles from my house, and that was the biggest city. York was the main. York County is where I grew up, and York was the county seat for York County, but Baltimore was the big town where everything was happening, you know.
Yeah, I always wondered why there was such a strong bluegrass and country music scene in like the Baltimore, DC area.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's the reason. The first band to play Carnegie Hall, the first bluegrass band to play in Carnegie Hall, was a band playing a little old bar there in Baltimore. They were playing like 8 nights a week, play 7 nights a week, and a matinee on Sunday. You know how that is. and it was Earl Taylor and the Stony Mountain Boys, and And they were just a bunch of country boys, got together. But they did have a good band. They had a good bluegrass band. And I got to know a guy later on. His name is Ralph Rensler, and he was he managed Bill Monroe when I was working for Bill. He came after I did, actually. But this guy was up there in New York City, and he told me all about this folklorist, Alan Lomax.
Oh, sure.
And so Alan and Ralph Rensler, this guy's name is Ralph Rensler, and they knew each other, and they talked, and Alan wanted to get Bill Monroe to come up to Carnegie Hall, but because they wanted a bluegrass band, to come up there, or Flat and Scruggs, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, Ralph told him, he said, look, there's a band in Baltimore. They're a crack band. They really are good at what they do, at everything. And he said, well, look, tell me where they're at. And he told him, and he went down to this club, to audition them or just listen. He just sit all night and listen. Earl told me this story. He said this guy came in the bar, and they knew everybody came in there, and so he said, I saw this strange guy. He come and sit down at the table for two, and he had 2 drinks all night long. He knew everything,
2 drink minimum.
Yeah. So he said after it was over, after we've done it, like 2:30 in the morning, that 9 till 2 was the actual bar time, I think. This guy came up to me before I could put my mandolin away. He just put his mandolin, he had a little stand on the stage right behind him. He put his mandolin in that case. And then he said, I turned around, this guy had his hand stuck out, and he said, I'm Alan Lomax, and I'm going to put you in Carnegie Hall. And of course, Earl told me, he said, I'd heard that story before,
Sign on the dotted line. I'll make you a star.
Yeah. Thing,
Yeah.
And actually, he had no idea who Alan Lomax was. So, but he did. He took him to New York City, and he put him on a record. They didn't have a record. He did a record on folk. What was it? Folkways.
Folkways.
Folkways, yeah. And he said, and I'm going to put you in Carnegie Hall for a show, So he did that, and he said, when they got done with that record, he said, now look, I'm going to bring you back up here. And if you don't have this whole band with you, in other words, if he came with another bunch of guys, no, he ain't.
Deal's off.
Because Alan liked what he heard,
Yeah, wow.
5-piece band, he knew they were all good. Walter Hensley was the banjo player, and he was really great, I learned a lot from Walt. That's where I learned a lot of my banjo playing was from. So, I could just be right with him and see exactly what he was doing and how he backed up a singer. There's a lot of difference in there's
like playing between the hole or playing in the holes, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm talking about. And he could do that. And then they had a good fiddler, and they had a strong bass player and a strong lead singer. Earl was a tenor singer, played mandolin and sang tenor, and he always had a lead singer that played guitar, and so that was and those guys all migrated from down there in Virginia or North Carolina or Tennessee, that's where they
is tenor singer the one doing the high part?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's like the high lonesome, if you will.
Yeah, true. And Earl was really good at that. He had been I'll go back a little further. There's a guy named Jimmy Martin that sang with Bill Monroe, on the Opry, and he quit and went to Detroit. These guys, this one guy, Earl, was up there in Detroit, and he hired him to play the mandolin and sing tenor with him, and then Jimmy went back with Bill Monroe and recorded a lot of things and worked for Bill Monroe again. Quit the band up there, and those guys then they migrated to Baltimore, and that's how come Earl was there in Baltimore. And he was a good tenor singer and a good mandolin player, and usually that's the way it is. And then the guitar player usually sing lead,
right?
And say the banjo player will do baritone, or fiddle player, or whatever, bass player,
Does the tenor singing, did that evolve out of yodeling in some way? Is there some connection to yodeling? It seems like yodeling and tenor and the high lonesome are like somehow connected.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. See, Bill Monroe was a tenor singer too, although he sang like when Lester Flatt was in his band, he did most all the verses in a song, and Bill Monroe would sing tenor with him. But then gradually, Bill started singing solos also because he was the star and he was on Decca Records, and
Sure.
And he almost had to do that. He did a lot. Well, he recorded a lot of solos before that, but what I'm getting at, he was good at yodeling too. Bill was, but he learned from Jimmy Rogers. See, he was at the age when he was young. Jimmy Rogers was big, and he said, he lived up here in Kentucky, and he said, I drove a team of mules and, plowing the fields or whatever they had to do up there. And he said, I'd yodel and I'd just sing as loud as that because nobody could hear me. And that's where I got my practice, was in singing Jimmy Rogers songs and yodeling, but he had a natural high voice. And so that's probably where it came from. But there are a lot of tenor singers though in bluegrass bands that never did yodel. They just sing a high part, sing a part just above the lead.
With your own singing, like, is that something that you like? Is that something that you've just always done, or do you think about like the technique involved? And like, I'm always curious to see how, because in any genre of music, but especially in bluegrass, it's a hard life, and like you're driving all night to get to the next gig, and you're jamming all night with your friends at a festival, and like singing these incredibly high parts. How have you kept your voice together all these years, and how do other people do it? Like how it's such a technically difficult style of singing, and you see somebody like you that's done it for a very long time. I'm curious sort of how if there's technique involved, if there's warm-ups and cool downs, and do you get into all that stuff, or do you just do it?
I've never, I guess I gotta thank the Lord for my voice, because it's never failed me really, unless I had laryngitis or something like that, where I couldn't sing or talk, but and I've never had any problems with it. And I've sung in she'll get that, I hope. I've sung in bars, where you sing. You sing louder. You put more volume in it, And I might get a little hoarse, but then the next night I'm okay. But and I never warm up. Even today, I go out and play. Even to a big crowd, for some reason, I just never got used to warming up before it went on. I just tune up. That's it.
No warm up, just tune up.
Tune up. And when you hit the stage, it's hit or miss.
You never miss, sir. You never miss.
But I do, once in a while, I can tell, the first song, I try to sing a fairly easy song to start with, and then work into it too, because your mind, you kind of have to get your mind adjusted to singing, all of a sudden. But no, I've never had any problems with it. I know a lot of people do have problems with hoarseness, Yeah, I guess it's from. I'll tell you what, Chris, and you probably noticed this too before. What'll make me hoarse quicker than anything is the singing that night don't bother me. But if I talk a lot, after the show, then I notice the next day I'm hoarse,
It's the hanging out. That's what does it, right? Yeah.
I think talking is worse than singing,
I think you're right.
It is for me. I know. I can sing every night, and I can tell the edge is off, like the second or third night, but it'll kind of come back in, pretty quick. But if I talk a lot, that really gets me. Yeah.
Hey, what does the phrase vocal stylist mean to you? Because I've heard you talk about that, like how, back in the day, guys like Bill Monroe or the, Stanley Brothers, whoever were like, they were all stylists, not just singers.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a natural thing. It was just the way they approached a note, or came out of a note. I don't know what it is. And then, of course, everybody's voice has a certain tone too, and if they're true to themselves, they'll use that instead of, a lot of people copy. I know in the beginning I did, you got to have somebody to kind of copy, to get started. And soon I learned though that whatever I did naturally that's the thing to do, because that'll be with you forever. But a style, I think a style comes with the songs you choose to record, and if you are just singing naturally, that's your style, and a lot of those guys, that was their natural style. Those old bluegrass singers,
Right. Their singing voice was their speaking voice.
Yeah, that's true. Lester Flatt, if you ever heard him talk, you'd think, oh yeah, I know how he'd sound the
same. On a related note, like how do you approach, in a genre like bluegrass, there's like a songbook of classics that everybody does, these songs that have been done a million times. When you're going to do one of those songs, when you're going to perform it or record it, how do you approach that? Like to kind of put your own stamp on it?
Well, usually if I do a song, well, let's see, what would I say about that? If I do record a song that somebody else has done before me, I try. The reason I like the song is because the way they sang it, and I try to sing it kind of like they did,
Right.
If it's a new song, something I wrote or something that somebody else wrote that they gave to me to record, or something I wrote with somebody, then you just have to, a lot of times you have to put your own melody to the song, but if, I tell you, I don't think I record as many other people's songs as I used to. Now I did do a Bill Monroe thing in 2011 because he would have been 100 years old then. And I did a whole record of Bill Monroe songs, and some of the songs that I did were songs that I had sang with him when I was on the road shows with him, but then there's some that I never even heard him sing, but I knew him from records I had.
Right. Did you know just a ton of his songs before you started playing with him? I mean, you must have, right? Like, because didn't he like stop by a club you were playing at and go like, get in the van, let's go, we're going to a gig? Wasn't it some crazy story like that?
Exactly right. I was still playing banjo when I tell you what, I got this job playing banjo with Jack Cook. He was an ex-bluegrass boy. He played with Bill Monroe in like 58, maybe 58 to 60 or something like that. And he quit Bill Monroe and came to D.C. to play with the Stoneman family, because the Stoneman family had a TV show there in Washington, WTT, Channel 5, WTTG. And anyway, he came and got a job with that band. And then he quit that band. They lost their TV show, and he quit that band, came to Baltimore and got a job with Earl Taylor, the guy I just mentioned. The other guy quit or something. And then he played with Earl Taylor for a while. Then he got his own band, and I was one of his first banjo players. I was the banjo player then, and I knew he was a good guitar player. He really was. He's a really good bluegrass guitar. He could play runs real well, and rhythm. He had his wrist was just like rubber. It just and it takes a good wrist. Because some of those, like Bill Monroe, played rawhide, and you had to have a real limber wrist. You couldn't use your arm because you couldn't keep up, with him.
Yeah.
But if your wrist was limber, then you could play just like he did. That's the way he played, with just his wrist is all moved, And Jack Cook was really a good wrist man, and I got a job playing with him. And that's how I got my job with Bill Monroe, because he came through Baltimore to pick Jack up to go to New York City to play a show. It was in the wintertime, and a couple of his guys quit all at once. And he knew he could get Jack to go with him to New York City as an ex-Bluegrass. And he knew all of Bill's stuff,
Sure.
And Bill said to him, he said, do you have a banjo player? And he said, no. And he said, we'll just take Dale with us. He said, he can do that. He can do that stuff that you do, And I thought I was pretty good by that time. But then he offered me a job playing banjo with him, and I didn't take him up on it. Until later, I don't know, maybe a month later, I decided I should do that. And
hold. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but let me interrupt you. Why would you turn down a gig with like the king of bluegrass at that point in your life?
That's a good question. Jack was closer to my age, and I hadn't been with Jack too long, and I was so enthused about playing with Jack Cook. More so than I would with Bill Monroe. I had come up through the ranks playing in different bands and having to play with bad guitar players. They're your rhythm. Them and the bass fiddle are your rhythm. and I knew, I just knew that there's got to be a better guitar player somewhere. And it was Jack. He was the first really great guitar player. And so I was, so what you just said now, that actually happened. I turned Bill Monroe down. So one of my best buddies, who's a fiddle player, he played with me a lot. And he said, you mean you turned him down? I said, well, yeah, I like playing with Jack, Me and Jack's about the same age. And he's a little older than me, but I was closer in age to Jack Cook. And so Bobby told me, he said, a lot of guys would kill to have that job. He said, if you take that job, I'll take you down there. This Bobby I'm telling you about, his name is Bobby Diamond. He was a fiddle player, banjo player, and he was also a carny. And he only worked, in the summertime. They'd put their rides away in October, I think it was, and they didn't have to get back out till May 1st, And so in the wintertime, he had a Cadillac. Oh, every time you see him, have a different car. He'd have a Corvette one night. A week later, he'd have a Cadillac. One of those guys.
That totally supports my theory that all musicians are essentially carnies.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we all do,
I know it is, ain't it true? But he told me, he said, look, if you, why don't you take that job? I'll take you down. I'll run you down there in my car. Well, he talked me into it, and I did. I knew I should do it, and so I went. But the thing about it was, Bill Monroe told me, he said, he gave me a phone number down in Baltimore when he left. He said, now, if you ever take a notion to quit Jack, you come down, I'll give you a job. Well, he gave me a phone number. He said, and if you ever come to town, go to the Clarkston Hotel up on 7th Avenue and get you a room there. And call me and I'll come in and get you, Well, that's what I eventually did then. I went down there and I got this room. And so I called him up the next morning and he said, yeah, I'll be in there pretty soon. Well, he's a man of few words. He talked fast and didn't say much, And so when he came in, I noticed before he walked in, I was waiting in the lobby with a banjo, and another guy came in the lobby with a banjo too at the same time. And I didn't even get time to talk to this other guy. And so Bill walks in, he said, come on, follow me, boys. So we went next door to a restaurant that was connected to the hotel. And he bought us breakfast, and we sat there, and I ordered this. Now, this is a funny thing because we're both carrying banjos, But he never said, look, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. He just didn't say nothing. When he got done, he paid the bill, and we went next door to there. It was a place called the National Life and Accident Insurance Building, and that was the they sponsored the Grand Ole Opry, and they had Friday Night Opry in that building. And so we followed him in there, and we got on an elevator and went up to a certain floor, and we went in there, and when we walked in that room, there was a guitar case in that room, and evidently he had used it a lot. I don't know. And he told me, he said, "Now, Dale, you get that guitar out." Well, I went over and got that. I thought, what kind of deal is this, And so I went over and I got the guitar out, and he had me play it. Well, I could play a guitar. I knew how to play one, And so now in later years, this other guy, then he played banjo. And then he got that guy to play guitar a while, and I played banjo. And later on, the guy's name is Bill Keys. You probably heard of Brad Keys, Bill Keys. He was a great banjo player, man. He played a style I never heard before. It was a Scruggs style mixed in with single note stuff, everything. Usually what Earl played was in a forward roll or a backward roll, but this guy, man, he was really good. And so he gave him the job of playing banjo. And he told me, he said, "Now Dale, I want you to play the guitar. You'll like that job better," he told me.
he decided for you.
That kind of guy, he'd look at you and say, "You're going to play a bass."
You're like, "I'm a tuba player, man. What are you talking about?"
But that's the way Bill was, and
yeah.
So we took the job like that, and I never seriously went back to playing banjo.
Interesting. Even in your spare time, just sitting around at home?
Yeah, I did that. I did, and I've still got my old banjo. I got a 1934 Gibson.
Oh, nice.
From Walter Hensley, and it's a great banjo, And my son, when he started playing, he started on that one, Of course,
nice.
His own banjos now, but.
I've heard you refer to your guitar playing as hard rhythm. And I've also heard, I think maybe your son told me that Bill Monroe's advice was like, keep your wrist loose like a dish rag or something like that. So I'm curious about, I'd love to talk to you about your guitar playing a little bit. How did you, did Bill Monroe actually sit down and literally teach you the chords, or did you already kind of have a knowledge of that coming in?
I knew all that. I knew the chords, and I knew when he put me on the guitar, I thought, I wonder if I can play with him. I just wonder if I can keep time with him. And I found out
because like you said, you got to be the driving force. You're like the backbone of it, right?
Yeah. And he, when he sang or back up another instrument, he played rhythm on his mandolin. He played like a chop.
Sure.
The back beat, that's what he'd play. And I wondered if I could play with him because I knew he was good, and I found out I didn't have any problem at all playing with him, and he could play as fast as he wanted to play. And I was right there with him. I mean, I was right on his back,
And while you're singing, are you doing all that alternating bass kind of stuff and throwing little runs in there?
Yeah. Like in between the lines, he put a run in, just to fill the hole up.
Yeah.
And because you're close to the mic, you're the closest one to the mic. Back then we only had one mic most of the time.
Sure.
And I just put the guitar up a little bit and put a run in, and then go to singing and play rhythm, and kind of, it's like a mixture of runs and rhythm,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, and if you have a good wrist, you can play pretty hard. And it won't bother you. It didn't hurt you at all,
How did you come up with that thing where you when you do the G run, you throw an F in there, like the flat 7, which is a little different than a lot of bluegrass guys do. Where did you come up with that?
Well, I a lot of those old like little Maggie and Pretty Polly and all those mountain numbers, that were kind of modal sounding, and I figured, what, if I play this, I believe that goes better with it than it's just a regular G run, and So I just started doing that, and I still do it on certain things, and then others I'll play the regular flat run, we call it.
Right.
The Lester Flat G run, you know.
Right.
But there's a lot of versions of that too, you know. And Jimmy Martin, he had a bunch of different versions of the G run, you know. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, that one time I figured that out, you know, that would go better with that. I don't know. That's been years ago too now, you know. It was probably when I was with Bill, because, you know, he sang a lot of modal sounding tunes too, you know. And I learned a lot with him. I did, because we were playing every day, you know, just go. And
Did you learn a lot from him also just as a band leader?
I did. I think I did, because I didn't learn MCing from him. I think he would like me to help him with MCing, but I couldn't talk in front of a mic then yet, you know. I just never had to do it.
Right.
And then after I quit him, I had to do it. And that's kind of when I learned to MC. But I learned a lot about, what would I say? I learned a lot about a show, about keeping different moods and different rhythms and in a show to keep the fans interested, you know, and not playing the same key over and over and over, the same key. I've heard bands, you know, I remember when I was pretty young yet, I heard this band, they were a good band. And after about 20 minutes, I thought, you know, they sound like the same, song sounds just like the one they did before, you know. And I thought, I know what it is. They haven't changed keys since they started. Playing key of A the whole way through the show.
Right.
And, you know, it gets monotonous.
Yeah. And as well as like just the dynamics and the tempo and all that, and the mood. And
that's right. Yeah. The dynamics and the different speeds of the song, you know. And so, and Bill did that, probably unconsciously, because he did a lot of requests from the stage, you know.
Really?
He did. He had to do a lot of requests. He had a certain way to do a show. He'd start with introducing each member of the band, doing something, you know, like Bill Keith was a great banjo player, and he'd have him play a banjo tune and have the fiddle player do a fiddle tune. He had Kenny Baker, he was a premier fiddler, man. He had been playing with, I mentioned the old Lonesome Me guy. Can't remember his name. He'd been playing with him. He had been playing with that guy. And he said, this guy was from the Eastern Kentucky, this Kenny Baker. And he was playing with him, and he said, you'd have thought he knew a little bit about bluegrass, you know, but he never even had any interest in playing any bluegrass. But he was playing with this guy, and he said, we were in a restaurant one time, and I saw this song on the jukebox said Cheyenne. That's all it said, just Cheyenne on the song. And Bill Monroe, Cheyenne. And he said, I put a nickel in back then, you could. Said, I played that tune, and it was mainly fiddle. And he said, I'll bet you I put $10 worth of nickels in that jukebox while we were there on account of that one tune. And that's the first he really paid any attention to Bill Monroe. They were both from the same state. And later on, though, he got a job with Bill, you know, and he still had to learn a lot of Bill's tunes. First time I saw Bill Monroe, no, it wasn't the first time. I saw him in 1958, and this guy just started, Kenny Baker. And the banjo player, after the show, backstage, I could look around behind the stage, and this guy was showing him, the banjo player had his fiddle showing him how to play it. And I thought, well, that's unusual. But what it was, that banjo player had played fiddle with Bill before and knew all the song breaks.
Right. And then Bill Monroe decided he was a banjo player, and that was the end of that.
he couldn't play fiddle no more.
Hey, did you play on Bill Monroe's baseball team? Wasn't there something about like wouldn't he like organize baseball games on the road all the time?
Yeah, but no, he'd quit that when I come. I think he did that in the 40s, war years, and
You're right.
there he had he had a like school bus to haul guys in a ball team, and he also had trucks to haul the tent. And I'll tell you a little story about that. He told me this. He said, and Bill, now he'd get out there and work. When they get to this town, they had a guy that went in front of them. They didn't advertise. Now, Bill could advertise over the Opry that he's going to be someplace.
Sure.
But they had a guy that went in a car the day that before that they were going to be there. He'd go in this car, and he had a microphone, and he'd drive around that community, and he'd say, now, Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys are going to be here tomorrow in such and such a field. Over here, it's out country, always.
Really? So he wasn't even playing venues. He was just putting a tent up.
Yeah. And this guy was just advertising from that car and a speaker
right.
Top of him, driving all around. And he'd say, now Bill's going to be here tomorrow with his baseball team, and you're going to play the so-and-sos from this community, And he had his own baseball team. And when they got there, first thing they'd do before they had the baseball game was they'd put the tent up. And so Bill said, I was there. He said, I'd drive stakes with a sledgehammer, and a lot of the local people would come out and volunteer to like hold a stake until you drive it down and pull ropes. And you know how that is, putting up a tent, big tent. I mean, it was big. Had to hold on a big truck, And so he said, this guy would say, now I've heard Bill Monroe's going to be here. Is he here yet? And he stayed with all day long. He stayed with Bill. And he had help stake, and Bill hit it, and then he'd drive it on down the ground, And that guy'd say, I wonder when Bill Monroe's going to be. Oh, he'll be here. You just keep, you just have to watch around for him. He'll be here. Not knowing that's him right there. He would put people on like that. He loved, and young musicians like me, he loved them on. I never knew when that guy was serious and when he was just joking, because he never smiled. He'd tell you something, and you think, I wonder if he's lying to me.
Then he'd never say, just kidding.
No, never.
The baseball thing, the putting up the tent, I mean, it sounds like an insane amount of work for what is already an insane amount of work just being a musician. It's kind of shining light on why he burned through so many band members so fast. I'm beginning to understand that a little better now.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
Earl Scruggs told some great stories. He said Bill wasn't good. He wasn't a good businessman, which I knew that. He
really.
He said, now he was making a lot of money during the war when nobody was making anything. I mean, everything was shut down. He'd go to these little old towns and he didn't charge much money, but he everybody in that community would come out and see him that night, and come out and see their team play the ball and all that. And he said, I was making money hand over fist, and I was only in my 20s. And he said, I just figured it'd be like that forever.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it just quit, just like that. And he didn't spend all his money,
Yeah. God, if that isn't a classic music industry story, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
Where'd my Lamborghini go, man? What happened?
Exactly. The guy, he never fooled with drinking or any kind of dope or anything like that, but he did have a weakness: women. He did. He really did. Oh, he made his own self miserable that way, Yeah, I enjoyed working for him. I never had any cross words with him at all, and I should have stayed longer, but I quit and went to California.
Ooh, yeah. No, let's talk. I want to talk to you a lot about that, actually. But before we do, I wanted to talk to you first about, didn't you play the first Newport Folk Fest when you were with Bill Monroe?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Was there any interaction between you guys and Bob Dylan?
No, I remember him being there, and I remember him singing, and I thought, God, that guy ain't too good a singer, is he?
That kid must have had a rough one last night. He sounds a little hoarse.
Yeah. but I didn't realize. I wasn't following the folk scene or any
Right.
of that. I didn't know who he was really. And him and that. What was the girl singer? She sang with
Was it
him.
Joan Baez?
Yeah, Joan. She was a good singer, but that was the first time Bill Monroe had played that folk festival. We'd played some other ones, before, but they were just kind of starting then. Those
Right.
folk festivals. Actually, it was before a bluegrass festival. The first one of those was 65.
Okay. I mean, what did the like people like Bill Monroe or even yourself or anybody around the sort of traditional bluegrass world think of the folk revival and the interest in bluegrass from like all these college kids that weren't, like it's a bit of a two worlds colliding, I would think.
Yeah. I mentioned Ralph Rensler. Ralph, he came in the band. He came in and started managing Bill just after I was there, and I realized that Ralph knew all this stuff. He was from New York City, and he knew the music scene outside of Nashville and bluegrass and all like that. He knew that whole scene, and he was the one that got Bill to the folk festival there, the Chicago Folk Festival, the one in Philadelphia Folk Festival. And actually that was the first time Bill Monroe had ever played anything, especially up in the Northeast. He never actually played up in there till Ralph started managing him. And that's the first any of us, back, instead of calling them hippies, we call them, what do we call those guys? The guys that were
beatniks. That would have been a little like that. This is a little, we're still a little before the hippie era at this point. Like when I think of the sort of folk revival.
We did call them beatniks. That's what it was. But they, I don't know when that big festival came in New York out there in what's the name of that place?
What, Woodstock?
Woodstock. Do you know what year that was?
I think that I don't remember. I'm gonna have to delete this from this interview because I don't remember. Was it 67 or 68, 69, somewhere in there? I forget.
Yeah, I thought it was later. Yeah.
It could have been. I mean, maybe it was 70. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, I don't either. I never. The only ones I knew about was the ones I mentioned. Those three.
Yeah.
Oh, well, no, we played one. I'll tell you what, we played one in Berkeley.
Ah, okay.
We played one in Berkeley. It's the first time I met Doc Watson. We'd played out there and Ralph wanted Doc and Bill to do some of the old Monroe Brothers things. This is pre-bluegrass, when Bill and his brothers, just two of them.
Did Doc live on the West Coast at that point?
No, he didn't. He lived there right out. Just out of Asheville there. What was that town? I forget all these places anymore.
Right.
But he lived there in the mountains in North Carolina. Yeah.
Did you guys just cross paths in Berkeley on tour or something?
Yeah. What happened? He had booked him out there, and that's the first I met him, and it's the first that Bill met him. Ralph knew him. Ralph got him to come out there without his bunch. He had a guitar player, I think, with him, and old guy played banjo. His name. Well, anyway, there's at least three of them in Doc's band, but he wanted Doc to just come out there and play this Monroe Brothers stuff with Bill because he knew he could do it.
Right.
And so that they played in Berkeley, and we did the band. We drove up. They flew up, and we drove up, and we got there a day later. They did a workshop or something before we got there. But yeah, Doc, I met him. I went home with him one time down there, and we took him home. Me and Bill Keith, for some reason, we took him from Nashville home. And we got there, and we got inside the house. And man, he knew where everything was at. He just walked straight to this. He'd walk straight over there to that, and and in those days, he had just had a little old wood stove there in the living room, and now he's talking every breath. He'd talk a lot, and he's talking every breath to me and Bill, and he went over there and he got some kindling and he put down in that stove, and then he reached up somewhere there and got a little bit of kerosene, poured it on it, and then he had some big old barn burning matches, about that long, put on the mantle, and he got one of them, struck it and lit that thing, and when it got going good, he put some bigger wood in there, and he knew how to do all that stuff without seeing, without seeing.
Right.
People said he went there one day and he's working on his roof. I forget what he's doing, but he's working on the roof.
It's always amazing how people adapt,
I know it is. Of course, he's probably not afraid of heights. For one thing.
That makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense. So you were out in Berkeley, but then is with Bill Monroe. But is that what led to you winding up out in Southern California? Because I'm really fascinated by that time in your career, because you don't think of Southern California as a hotbed of bluegrass music, or even country music, even though at one time it was, a hotbed for country music, certainly. But when you were there was the same time Tony Rice and really, the whole Rice family, and like the Dillards and Vernon Rex Gosden and Chris Hillman and Clarence and Roland White, like all these people that went on to be legends were all these young folks in Southern California. How did that happen? And what was the scene like?
This is a crazy thing, but when I was working for Bill, that's when he got booked at the Ash Grove. We got booked there a couple different times. We had to go all the way to the West Coast to do that. And so when we got there the first time, I think, I didn't know a thing about California, I'd never been there. And Bill told me and Kenny Baker, the fiddler, he said, now, these guys want you to stay with them, while we're playing. I think we was there for 2 weeks at that club. And so we had no idea who they were. They came and got us in a 56 Cadillac, and it was the Dillards. They had just started working on the Andy Griffith Show, and they said they were down to one can of Campbell's soup, and they got that job. Now this is
and the next thing you know, they got a Cadillac. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's a real Hollywood story right there.
Of course, back then, I knew I could spot a car and I knew what year it was, It was a 56 Cadillac, what they had. And anyway, so we go up there. Well, now, Bill he should have expected this, that we're not going to sleep when we go home, because we couldn't. It was just a big party every night,
Right.
We played the Ash Grove. They'd come get us, because they didn't play much. They just played for Andy. And, and there's been long times when they didn't play at all, it was just for the TV show, it just started.
Was there not much of a scene for that music, like for the live scene?
Oh, no, not really. I don't think there was, but it's funny. There's, I think it was a lot like I said about people moving from the mountains up to Baltimore. I think a lot of the Arkies and the Okies and a lot of others, they went that way, and they were playing music, and a lot of them, the only place they could play was in a bar, out there.
I mean, that explains like the Bakersfield sound and all the West Coast countries for sure. Everybody moving out west, like during the Depression and post-war for like jobs in the aerospace industry or whatever. That's
right. Yeah, exactly. And so, and that's when I met all those guys, because if they didn't come to the show and they'd come to the party at night, like the White brothers, all of the White brothers, all three of them. And I got to play with the bass player later on. But anyway, them and Billy Ray Latham, he's playing banjo with them, and it's a big tall guy playing. McNeese, he's playing dobro. And then, like I said, Vernon Rex and the little guy, this just a little kid then played mandolin.
Chris Hillman.
Chris, yeah. And David, Don Parmley. Don Parmley, he moved with his boys to the east later on. But they had a band, Don Parmley and the Gosden brothers and Chris Hillman. And then the other band there was another band. Now, what was that? That band, the White Brothers. Oh, and I guess it was the Dillards. That was the ones that I kind of got to know that first 2 weeks while I was out there, And so one night before I left the Ash Grove, after we got done playing, Monroe told me, he said, "Hey, I want you to get some sleep tonight." How do you know we're not sleeping?
How'd he figure this out? He's so wise.
He was, of course, he's already pretty wise. He's 52 years old. He knew,
Yeah.
But we couldn't. We go up there, and those guys, they wanted to party all night, and they play guitar. Oh, and the White Clarence, He had that old guitar, that old is a 1934 D28.
Is that the one that Tony Rice eventually acquired? Yeah. That's like the one.
It was.
Yeah.
And he'd sit around. We all smoked in those days, and he'd duck his ashes in the hole of the guitar.
Really?
Always didn't use the ashtray. If it was sitting here, he'd still duck his ashes in there. Yeah,
that's hilarious. So there was because at that time I have to assume there wasn't like this the vintage music gear kind of fascination that we all have now.
Yeah, that's true. It wasn't, oh, and well then later, then I quit Bill. I got this guy a job with Bill. He's a fiddle player named Billy Baker, and I told Billy, I said, they offered me a job out there in California playing in a band, the Golden State Boys.
Right.
And but I said, I don't go out there. I don't want to quit Bill, I was single, and everything. He said, he kept on me. He said, let's go to California. And I said, no, man, I don't go out there, because I knew I was learning with Bill, and I should stay. But he won out, and finally I called him up and I said, look, I'll come out there and take that job playing banjo. That's what they wanted me to do, play banjo. But this fiddle player wants to come with me, and I said, I'll come if I can bring him. And they said, well, look, the manager of the band called up and he said, look, I'll call you back in a half an hour and let you know. Evidently he wanted to talk to the band, and see what they said. And half an hour, he called back to that number wherever I was at, and he said, yeah, bring him and come on. Well, then I couldn't hardly back out then. So we both quit Bill Monroe and went to the West Coast, And that's how come me out there. And then I got this job playing with the Golden State Boys. And the leader of that band was Hal Poindexter, and that was Tony Rice's uncle. Tony Rice. Mom's brother,
Yeah. So did you interact much with Tony at that time?
Well, Tony, when I met him, he's 13, but he's only about that tall, he wasn't grown. And he was playing a D18 guitar. He played with his dad and his brother on a radio show, and we'd hear it on the radio, it was called a Squeakin' Deacon show. And me and the fiddle player stopped by there one time and met Herb Rice and the two boys, and then that was the only time I really ever saw him. Now that his other brother though played on that TV show with us. He played mandolin with us.
He was in the Golden State Boys. Because wasn't Tony Rice's dad in the Golden State Boys before you or something? Isn't there some connection there?
Yeah, that's right. He was. I think he might have been one of the founders.
Right.
Herb Rice, yeah, and. That's the connection then with the Poindexters and Rices,
Right.
But there've been a lot of people going through that band. Don Parmley went through that band, and I don't know who all before I ever was there,
I think that's one of the fascinating things about bluegrass in general is how many the tentacles of it. You know, you look at somebody, I mean, I know we've talked a lot about Bill Monroe, but I think this is true of like a lot of other bluegrass people, like legends too, that all the sidemen, not all of them, but a lot of the sidemen in those bands go on to be band leaders and legends in their own right. And, you know, it just kind of keeps regenerating in that way.
It's true, you know, and like that first generation, you know, Bill Monroe, then Jimmy Martin and Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs and Don Reno and that.
Didn't Mac Weissman go through his band at one point too? And
He followed. He was before Jimmy. That's right. He was just before Jimmy. In fact, Mac, when Flatt and Scruggs quit Bill Monroe and went, and they had no intention of having a band, but later on, what it was, Earl quit because he wanted to take care of his mother. His mother was sick. Well, then somehow they met later on because Flatt said after that he never had no banjo picker. It's the last. I mean, they had some. He just stood there. He'd hold a banjo, but that's about it. After Earl left, you know. So Lester, he gave his notice. He quit. And then later on, they got together and they said, why don't we start our own band? Well, they did. And then they hired Mac Wiseman to sing tenor with them. And that's how Bill Monroe heard Mac Wiseman.
Oh, wow.
Because they were on WCYB there in Bristol, Tennessee. And Bill Monroe, he'd tell his boys, now Bill didn't tell me this, as some of his guys that played with him, they said that Bill would say, now look, when we're going, say, to Maryland or something from Nashville, I want to go through Bristol about the time that boy starts singing. And he's talking about Mac Wiseman. He liked his singing. And so he'd guest on their show too, on Flatt and Scruggs' show there. And so he told Mac, he said, hey, if you ever want a job, you know, call me up. Well, Mac told us the story then. He said he called him up and said, yeah, I've quit Flatt and Scruggs, and he said, I'd like to go to work for you, you know. And he said, what I was thinking about was the Grand Ole Opry. I wasn't thinking about Bill Monroe. Back on the Opry.
Sure.
So Bill said, well, I'll tell you what, meet me in Atlanta somewhere, because he's going to play there. So he went from Bristol to Atlanta to meet Bill to play that night. No rehearsing or nothing. That's the way I always done. So he said, I got there, and Bill said, now, Mac, he'd look at you, and I could just picture it now. He had blue eyes, and it looked like he's looking straight through you, you know. And he said, Mac, now what can we sing together? And Mac said, I felt my blood run to my feet. I didn't know nothing. And he did nothing. He said, all I could do is sing, I wonder how the old folks are at home. That was his own song. Yeah, he said, man, I just didn't think about it. All I was thinking about was the Grand Ole Opry. And here he said that. Now, what can we sing together?
Right. Oh no, I got to know all this guy's songs too.
Yeah. What kind of deal is this?
Hey, I wanted to jump ahead a little bit. You know, we talked about the folk revival and festivals and things like that. But can you talk a little bit about what place Carlton Haney played in sort of bluegrass history? Because I know he organized a lot of the festivals there for a time. And during those years, were those festivals kind of like the income lifeblood for a lot of bluegrassers?
Yes, you hit the nail right on the head. I'll tell you, when I was working for Bill, at that time, Carlton Haney was managing Don Reno and Red Smiley, and they were working out of Roanoke. You know, they had a TV show there, and he was their manager. Well, but he knew Bill Monroe because he'd booked Bill Monroe at a lot of different places. So I remember we went somewhere, and by this time we had a bus, and that's a long story too. But anyway, we came in off the road, and I was living at the Clarkston Hotel up there. And of course, I was going to get out of the bus right there, and probably the banjo player was too, I think. And anyway, we got out of the bus, and they just parked the bus, and Carlton and Bill and the whole band just walked into the lobby of the hotel. and just sat around there and was talking, And I remember Carlton Haney talking to Bill. This is 63. He was talking to Bill about having a bluegrass festival, and Bill said, "Shh, that won't work." That was his word. He said, and he just figured, now this is another one of Carlton Haney's big ideas. You know how those guys, and it's kind of like when Earl Taylor met Alan Lomax,
Right.
Big ideas.
Yeah, I've heard this spiel before.
Yeah. So, but he said, "Now I'll tell you, Bill, it'll work. We'll get all of the bluegrass bands and we'll play it, and because they're not working that much, which is true. You could book those bands then, because the top-notch bands weren't all working. They're begging for work. So, but Bill said, no, it won't work. Well, by 65, I quit in 64. And by 65, he had one in Fincastle, Virginia, the first one. And he figured, well, if Bill ain't going to work with me to help me get this thing started, that's what he wanted. He wanted a partner to help him start this thing off. And he said, I'll just book him. So he booked him and every bluegrass band that was worth a shit. Pardon my English. Flat and Scruggs, he booked them on it. He booked everybody but Jim and Jesse for some reason. Jim and Jesse McReynolds, they were big too then. But he had booked Mac Wiseman. He'd booked Don and Red Smiley. He'd booked Jimmy Martin, Bill Monroe, of course, and all of the great bluegrassers. He booked them on there in 65. And then he had one in 66 at that same place. And then he decided that he would like to move further north to get the big cities, get closer to the big cities, And he went to Berryville, Virginia, which is not far out of D.C. there. But he did. When he moved up there, it made a big difference. They were coming out of New England. People were, coming. There was it's kind of underground. There was a lot of people listening to the music, but didn't know where to go see it, And it was Carlton's idea to do this. Well, he moved there in 67. And of course, I got to know him, and he booked me on his festivals, his first ones, with my band. And my band was just starting with him, so they would play there at Berryville in 67. And Bill Monroe told me, he said, he must have got wise by 67, because he told me, he said, now I'm going to start my own festival out there in Bean Blossom, Indiana, and I want you to play it. Well, I said, yeah, I'd love to, So he said, now you just send me a contract. Well, every year that he ran from that time on, I just sent him a contract every year, and he'd sign it, send it back,
Really?
Before I had a manager or anything, I did
Sure.
my own contracts and stuff. But I was on good terms with him even after I quit. He knew that he actually wasn't playing a whole lot even when I was with him. He either he wasn't playing a lot, or he wasn't making much money, or both.
Right.
I know one time this promoter had booked him a week somewhere and gave him a check that was no good and put him way back. He couldn't pay.
Right.
And of course, I didn't care because I was single. Now those guys that were married, it was tough on them.
Right.
And I would have stayed. I'd just go up to him after we'd eat breakfast somewhere, and I'd say, Bill, can you get this? Hand him my ticket.
Right.
And he would,
I mean, you've been involved in this music for so long, and bluegrass as a genre kind of weaves in and out of mainstream consciousness here and there. And I imagine you've seen some big ebbs and flows. Like, it's like every now and again there's a "Oh brother, where art thou" kind of moment. That where there's probably a lot of light shown on the genre. But I'm curious, through those years when you were really getting your solo career off the ground, like through the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s, when you were also like working a day job, I think, right? Through all that time. I mean, what was sort of the life and lifestyle of a bluegrass musician through that time?
Wow. Like I said, I got acquainted with Carlton, so I got to play his first festivals, and that was actually the made it more popular, was him having those festivals, because there'd be people coming from other states that maybe they'd run a campground or some kind of function like that, and they'd say to themselves, hey, we could have something like this. So that's how it all started, through Carlton. Other people decided, well, they could do that. And then the thing about it was, and I'll tell you another thing, Carlton, he had the 4th of July weekend. Well, that's a good weekend, for anything. And then he decided, you know what, I'm going to have a festival further south in Virginia. I mean, he went down to Camp Springs, North Carolina, and he started one there, and he used the Labor Day weekend for that one. So he had both weekends tied up in the summer for Bluegrass.
Right.
And then he started having competition, though, and then when the competition got great, with all these other festivals starting up, then it kind of ruined him as far as having music, because people
really,
they quit coming to his festivals, and other venues were paying the bands more than he was. He knew that he had it made, and he didn't have to pay them a whole lot, But
right.
Then their prices started going up, and that was the first. And then the next thing I think that I can remember was the Down from the Mountain thing. That was the next thing to boost the music, But you're right about that. It's been up and down,
Between festival gigs, where would you play? Were you playing like bars, little honky tonks and places like that?
Oh yeah, and in those days, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I played quite a few bars in Baltimore. All bunches of them, Some of them were pretty peaceful, and some, there's a lot of those longshoremen would be out on the water for maybe a year. They come back home to Baltimore, man, they would celebrate like with knives and guns and whiskey. It's all mixed together,
Right. Knives, guns, whiskey, and having just gotten home from being out for a year. That's a rough concoction.
Yeah, that was a bad concoction.
Wow.
I remember playing a place called Stonewall Inn there on Route 40, going out of Baltimore, just outskirts there, and it was a big place, man. It had a big oval bar, and and the band, the stage was at one end of the oval, and all the rest, big long that way, big long back this way. And all of a sudden I heard something go pop. And I thought, that sounded like a pistol. We were playing. Now the guy runs the bar. He said, hey, if a fight breaks out, don't stop playing. That's the way they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard something go pop, and then I didn't see nothing. And then we're up there playing, and I'm the singer, so I had to keep singing. After a while, I saw a guy do this behind the bar.
Oh, no.
Now I looked across from him, and here's a guy with a pistol shooting at him.
Jesus.
And us crazy goons kept playing the whole time. Never did.
No. Seriously?
Stop.
Oh my God.
And I don't think he ever hit anybody, and I don't know what happened to the guy. He probably ran out of the bar,
Right.
Catch him. But that was just one example. And one night we were playing this bar, and the band was just in the corner of the room, and it was a big room, but the band it was not even on a riser or nothing, just standing in the corner of the room. And I'm on that side, the left-hand side. All of a sudden I saw something go in front of my face, and I looked to my left, and there's a knife stuck up right there in the wall right here.
What? Were they aiming for you?
No. This guy was dancing with some other guy's girlfriend.
Oh my God.
Did that guy, and he missed him and me too.
Oh my God.
Oh man. But just the things I wouldn't do that today. That's just the things you go through,
Yeah. That's called paying your dues, but you never really realize you're paying them at the time. You're just like, oh my God, I'm on stage. This is great.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh man.
Uh,
But you're right. It's all in fun. It's just you just don't even think about it.
I mean, I have to ask you as I'm a dad myself, but as a father who plays in a band now with your sons,
Yeah.
how great is that? That every night on stage you get to look over and see your kids up there with you.
It's a great feeling, and it really is. And to know that they're good. I mean, I know a lot of family bands that some of the kids in the band might be just barely.
There might be a little nepotism involved.
Yeah. But, I think to myself, if these guys would quit, I don't know. I couldn't get anybody to replace them really, right away. And anyway, because they're really good at what they do, and I never forced them. I'll tell you back when they were little, the guys in my band were all middle 30s, that's what I was. And I just never even thought about these boys of mine playing music. And then I had these instruments laying around. Well, they and I never discouraged them from playing them. I just let them play them. I didn't care. And it was a natural thing though for me to, if I hear them trying something and I knew what they were trying to do, I might just tell them, now look right here, this note, here's where you're missing it right here. Just show them a little bit of something and then leave them, just go.
Yeah.
And eventually, they got pretty good at what they were doing. And Ronnie, he was playing fiddle or violin in school. He was in Little League baseball, and he was in violin, playing violin. Well, one day his violin teacher, she was really tickled with what he was doing, and she called me up and she said, hey, Ronnie was supposed to play, and I really miss him. He has to play about a ball game this week, and he was a good player, a good ball player. He was a pitcher. And he covered the third baseman, the fielders. He was good at it, good at baseball too for a kid. Anyway, so, and then I found out what it was. He's trying to quit the violin because he wants to play ball, Well, he did. He quit the teacher, and she was really disheartened about that. And
yeah.
So about this time, I had a little old mandolin that I had a 4104 bus then, a GM coach, and it had the racks. They used to have racks that went all across the top there. And I cut everything else out except the front part of the bus where the lounge was. I left that rack in there, and I put that old mandolin up in there. Didn't have a case for it or nothing. And everybody in the band could play a little bit on it, and they'd get it down and play it while we were going down the road a lot of times. And Ronnie, but I gave this thing to my banjo player to work on. He was a good craftsman, and it needed some work, so I gave it to Dick to work on. And in this meantime, Ronnie, he wants to play the mandolin. And I said, well, Dick's got it. And I told him he need not be in any hurry because we don't need it, Well, he said, when you see him, you tell him I want. And well, when he saw him, he really got on Dick. He wants that mandolin. So, and I thought, well, he'd play it for a little bit and then forget about it. But he never did. Once he got that mandolin in his hands, and Bill Monroe, see, I played a couple shows with Bill Monroe, and Bill took an interest in him, He'd take his hat off, put it on him, and put his mandolin in his ear, and,
Oh, nice.
And Bill figured, now, if I do this, it'll make him get interested in doing that,
Right. Yeah, what a gift for you to be able to give that to your son, that experience with Bill Monroe. I mean, that just doesn't get any cooler than that.
Yeah, and at time, I really didn't. I knew, I was really, like when we'd play the Opry, he'd play certain tunes he could play really good, and he'd play that rawhide a lot of times. And when he did, man, the crowd would just roar. And I couldn't even hear him playing,
Right.
To play rhythm with him. And I just watch his left heel, because he'd pat his heel instead of his toe. And I play with that left heel till he got, and when he come around and the applause stopped, I'd be with him, right with him.
Yeah.
But I used to, I'd kind of hang back. See, when we do a duet, he'd want me in there singing with him. Well, I'd kind of back off because he's the star, I think, to myself, And so he'd tell me, though, after the show, now, Dale, you get in there and crowd me. He wanted me to crowd him, And with that guitar and also singing, because he was a powerful singer, man. If you didn't get in there and sing pretty hard, he would just blow you away.
Right.
He had the tubes, man.
Yeah. It's from that time with the mules out in the field.
I guess it was, yeah.
Right.
And he really had a strong falsetto too. And he told me then, he said, now I'll tell you, when you sing with me, you'll never know when I go into falsetto. And of course, I had sung enough to know exactly when he went into falsetto.
But you got to play along. You got to be like, I never noticed, man. Good job.
Yeah. I did. I knew exactly. Of course, it's yodeling. That was all falsetto,
Sure.
But he was good at it, man. He was a good yodeler.
I get excited anytime I see, somebody playing with their kids and like at a professional level. It just makes me happy. I saw this footage of Earl Scruggs. I don't know when it was from. Must have been like the early 70s or sometime, maybe it was the mid 70s or something, but it's him playing with his kids. And he's Earl Scruggs. He's a little older at that point, but he still looks like Earl Scruggs. He's still pretty buttoned up. And his kids are young and have like long hair, and they're playing like modern rock and roll songs, but kind of bluegrassed up. And I just thought, oh man, that's the sweetest thing I've ever seen. It's so cool. They talk about like the two worlds colliding. Like that's like a perfect example of it,
Really, yeah. And Earl, he was enjoying that, playing with those young guys, playing that newer music.
Right. Yeah.
He told me one time, he said, Flat, he said he wanted to do those old songs over and over and over. And I got tired of it. I got tired of playing Down the Road and all that stuff, He said, I wanted to do something different. And that's when they started doing some of the Dylan numbers, and
sure.
And Flat, he didn't want to do that. He was really argued against all those tunes, but Earl did. And, then I should mention my other son, he started playing banjo when he was 9 years old. And he's natural southpaw. So he'd pick that thing up with his thumb key sticking down.
Oh, wow.
And I'd say, Rob, now I tell you got to learn to play it this way. Because if you get a banjo that if you have to have them make you one like this.
Right. Yeah, you don't see too many left-handed banjos, I'm guessing.
And I said, then you won't be able, if a guy comes up to you who's a banjo player and you want to, try his banjo out, you can't, because he's got it geared up this way, I said, because I had a great fiddle player one time. It was a natural southpaw, but he could play a fiddle right-handed, And I said, now Sonny Miller, you remember Sonny? Yeah. I said, now he's a natural southpaw too, but he plays that fiddle right-handed, and so I got him to do that. I got him to learn, and it's the same thing, It's just, ain't it funny? As a natural thing to do for that left hand is to make that roll,
Right.
for him, and that same probably with Sonny with the bow, I would say. But they do a lot of them. I know a lot of left-handed fiddle players, a lot of left-handed guitar players, and there was a really good guy that played with Bill Keith, was a left-handed guitar player, and Jim Rooney. And he stayed here in Nashville, I know, and he became a producer. He produced all these big country acts, and he was a natural left-handed player. But he played it upside down, so he can play anybody's guitar,
Oh, wow.
It looks funny to see somebody play one upside down.
Yeah. Listen, I've taken up a lot of your time today, and I appreciate it very much. But I have one more question for you.
Yeah, man.
It's just popped into my head as I was like I said, I was doing some research and watching some other interviews that you've done, and you just seem like a really happy person. You seem like you've like discovered the secret to whatever a good life is. So I'm curious, what is the secret?
Well, Chris, I don't know. I think I've always been that way. It's hard for me to stay down. Once in a while, I'll get down, but then too, I'm happy with my wife and the kids. Although, the kids growing up, they give you a fit sometimes.
Don't I know it? I have 3 teenage boys.
Do you?
Yeah.
That's what it is then.
Oh yeah.
But I just and I still enjoy entertaining people. I just I enjoy singing to them, talking to them. From the stage. The crowd will entertain you.
Sure.
The people out in the audience, the things they say to you, they'll request songs that I've recorded now. They get it, the title of the song almost right. Except for one word.
Close enough. Yeah.
And they'll request a song some other bluegrass outfit has recorded,
Sure.
And then I'll tell them, I'll say, now look, we've got a pact. We don't do their songs and they don't do our songs.
Right.
And
yeah.
They're kind of, it really startles them when you tell them that. They think, well,
Right.
That's bluegrass. They can do anything that this guy can do.
Yeah. Sure.
But I'll tell you, people, the fans, they really entertain me. And I don't laugh at them, but they do. They entertain me.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
I think that's part of although I haven't done anything in a year now.
Sure.
I haven't done. I guess we played the Opry. I played the Opry on a Tuesday night in March last year.
It was like the last thing you did before COVID locked it down.
That was the last thing, and then we did something virtual, and then we did another thing at the Opry, and last fall though, my booking agent booked a lot of things where we played outside, where they could separate the people and all like that.
Yeah.
Quite a few things, and we had down in Texas and Louisiana, we had a tour booked where they could do that, even though it's cold up here, they could do it. But it didn't. It fell through, so we didn't do that either.
Right on. Well, I'm sure with the way things are headed, you'll be back out there before too long, as we all will. So I look forward to coming out and seeing you play somewhere.
Man, if you come up and then talk to me.
Oh, for sure. Sure. Yeah, that's a promise, man. I'm gonna be on you like a cheap suit.
I've fought with the law since I was 17.
Oh, yes. That was Mr. Del McCoury on Walking the Floor. I don't know about you, but I'm going to go home and practice my G runs, bust out my Tony Rice instructional DVDs, try to woodshed some of them licks, and we'll be back in a week. So, adios, amigos!
Then I'll give you my Vincent